Is the NCP about to change the course of one of the biggest constitutional battles in recent times? Well, that question is dominating political circles after sources suggested that the Sharad Pawar-led NCP could consider extending issue-based support to the centre's proposed Delimitation Bill. The speculation gathered momentum after late-night meetings between leaders of both the NCP factions and Maharashtra's Chief Minister, Devendra Fadnavis. While Jayant Patil has clarified that his meeting with the Chief Minister was only to discuss a constituency issue, and Supriya Sule has maintained that the party will decide its stand only after studying the final text of the bill and consulting India bloc partners, the political message is unmistakable. Every regional party now matters in the numbers game.
अभी कोई भी बिल का प्रस्ताव हमारे यहाँ नहीं आया है। कोई भी चर्चा डिलिमिटेशन के बारे में ना हमने किसी से की है ना किसी ने हमसे की। तो जब बिल आएगा तब हमारा स्टैंड होगा, लेकिन जो भी बिल आएगा हमें विस्तार से इंडिया अलायंस में चर्चा करेंगे। हमारी जो चर्चा हुई थी उसके बारे में मैंने कई लोगों से उसमें चर्चा की थी। तब डीएमके हो, हम हो, सपा हो, 50% के बारे में हम सोचेंगे, ऐसा हमने कहा था अभी जो सत्ता में है उनको, लेकिन वो बिल में नहीं आया, इसलिए वो बिल तो गिर गया।
At the center of this debate is the proposed Constitution 131st Amendment Bill, which is expected to return in the monsoon session of the Parliament. The legislation is expected to pave the way for delimitation, expansion of the Lok Sabha, and the implementation of women's reservation. The government argues that India needs a larger parliament and that constituencies should reflect today's population, upholding the principle of one person, one vote, one value. But the opposition sees a deeper political battle. Southern states argue that they are being punished for successfully controlling population growth. They fear a population-based delimitation formula would shift political power towards the Hindi heartland, reducing their representation in the parliament despite their significant contribution to the economy. Congress party leader Chidambaram, former finance minister, has already appealed to regional parties like the NCP, SP and the DMK not to support the bill, warning that it could fundamentally alter India's federal balance. There are also concerns over transparency, possible gerrymandering, and demands that any delimitation exercise be based on a fresh census with a clearly defined formula. For the NDA, however, the challenge is arithmetic. A constitutional amendment requires a special majority, making support or even abstention by regional parties crucial. So this is no longer just about increasing Lok Sabha seats. It's about political power, federalism, the North-South representation debate, and whether the government has the numbers, finally, to reshape India's electoral map. We have Smita Mishra, senior journalist, Aditya Goswami, Congress Party, Sukumar Patjoshi, constitution expert, now joining us. Thank you, all of you, for taking time out to be with that. I'm going to begin by asking, Aditya Goswami of the Congress Party. Aditya Goswami, fact of the matter is that you've seen one regional party with another regional party breaking, splintering. All of that augurs well when it comes to the final tally in the parliament for the NDA.
See, good evening to all my colleagues. See, there's a clear desperation from NDA and BJP's side to, get this bill passed in the parliament. We have seen how desperately the members of some of our alliance partners have been, broken into a faction which didn't even existed before the so-called, announcement of that faction. So this is a clear attempt by the BJP to, win the trust vote in its favor. But the real intent of the bill, the BJP, which introduced this bill previously in 2023, it wanted to give the women representation in the parliament and in every aspect of the society. But we have seen that BJP has failed to give women of our country the equal representation which they deserve. This delimitation bill is just a distraction to create a disparity among
but before we get to the bill,
the
Aditya
different
Goswami, I
regions.
want to understand what exactly is going to happen when it comes to numbers game. In the parliament, Smita Mishra, let me bring you in at this stage. The fact of the matter is that now there is very clear talk, buzz. We've seen the newspapers. There's a possibility now that the two NCPs could merge together and eventually be in support of the NDA. Do you see that happening, first of all? And more importantly, if that happens, will it set off a domino effect that will eventually, because post that, the NDA will be just about 6 or 7 votes short of that majority?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead, Smita.
Yes. So, whether the two factions of the NCP will merge into one is something I'll take up later. I think right at the moment we are more, more focused. The whole narrative is more focused on what will happen if the government brings this bill for women reservation in the monsoon session to begin early next week. I think it all started with Mr. Chidambaram's comment, because he spoke about, why the government is bringing the bill when there is already a bill and it has been passed already about women's reservation. Now, there is a very, very serious constitutional question here. The point is, yes, a women's reservation has been passed. That is a fact. But then that women's bill was passed with the clause that there will be a census, and following the census, there will be a delimitation. And then on the basis of the new delimitation of constituencies, women will be given reservation, 1/3 reservation with an increase of certain proportion of seats. Now, now that within the change situation, the government wants to improve on that and bring a bill where it ensures a proportionate rise in the number of seats, and not only number of seats, the proportionate share of each of the states, and on that to give this women's quota. Now, to do that, a new amendment has to be made, which failed in the last session. So therefore, the government is trying to muster up its numbers. Now, coming to this NCP question, yes, there were two rounds of very interesting meetings last evening, late night, I would say, in Mumbai, where both the factions met the BJP leadership, the CM, separately. Now, that is sure to trigger a buzz. I mean, everybody will take it seriously. Of course, Ms. Sule has clarified that they have not taken a position, because stories were reported everywhere all across the media this morning. Now, please notice one thing in Ms. Sule's statement. Whether you look at her post on X or you look at her video statement, I find one thing very interesting. She has nowhere said that they are going to oppose the bill. What has she said? She has said that we have had a discussion about the 50% rise in the total number, the proportion of the seats. And she has said that once we have a final draft, we will sit with our allies and in the party and take a call. Now, nobody can interpret it to mean that they are going to oppose. So even if she has not confirmed that they are going to support it, they are certainly keeping the doors open. And that is where I see a very interesting situation. So let's see. Let me also tell you that let's come to the DMK. What was the DMK's objection in, when they went with the India bloc and they also voted against the bill? The DMK's only objection was that their proportion of seats should be maintained. Mr. Stalin is on record, his MPs are on record to say that they are totally for the women's quota, but they want to be assured. To which the Home Minister Amit Shah said, give me 1 hour, I'll go and get it added as an added note to the bill and I'll come back. But the DMK and some other allies were not agreeable to it. They said, no, we want it to be put in the main body of the bill. We don't want an annexure. So if they are sticking to that position, so the government can rework the bill, put it in the main body of the bill, because in
Okay. The government can rework the bill. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Before that, let me quickly also bring in Sukumar Padjoshi, who's been patiently waiting. Sukumar Padjoshi, from a constitutional perspective, help us understand this. One is the debate around the delimitation per se. How fair is it going to be? Then there is that question of, if the number of seats are increased by 50%, then you can still do the delimitation and the regional parties also get what they want, and the women's reservation also, in one shot you can kill, one stone, three birds, so to speak.
Good evening. There are two distinct issues before us today. The first is a constitutional question, whether a fresh constitutional amendment is necessary to implement women's reservation along with delimitation. The second is the political speculations surrounding reports that the NCP, Sharad Pawar-led, may support the proposed legislation. It is now very important to analyze the constitutional issues separately from the political developments. Constitutional position as of now is that the 106th constitutional amendment has already provided for 1/3 reservation for women in the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. However, the amendment stipulates that the reservation will come into effect only after the next census and a subsequent delimitation exercise. The government's reported position is that another constitutional amendment is required to facilitate implementation in the time for next general election. On the other hand, as led by and stated by Mr. P. Chidambaram, has questioned the necessity of a fresh amendment. He argues that the existing constitutional framework already provides for women's reservation and that the real focus appears to be on delimitation. Ultimately, the delimitation itself, of course, now we will have to examine. Another amendment is legally necessary will depend on the precise language of the proposed bill, which has not yet been placed before the parliament. Let us understand the delimitation exercise. This is a constitutional exercise, nothing new. Delimitation itself is neither unusual nor extraordinary. It is a constitutional mechanism intended to periodically redraw parliamentary constituencies so that representation broadly reflects demographic changes. The real debate is not whether delimitation should take place, but how it should be carried out is the debate. Several states, they have successfully controlled population growth and are concerned that purely population-based exercise would reduce their relative representations in parliament. Others argue that democratic representation should continue to reflect population. Reconciling these competing concerns and compromising positions will be one of the parliament's biggest challenges. Now let us look at the political dimensions of these constitutional positions. Reports suggesting NCP may support proposed legislation have naturally attracted considerable attention. At the same time, Madam Supriya Sule has publicly clarified that the party has neither seen the bill and they will take a decision after the bill is placed, and otherwise it will be speculative and premature to discuss about that. Therefore, any conclusion about the party's future political alignment would be speculative at this stage. Now, so far as I am concerned, it is worthwhile to remember that the support for constitutional amendment does not necessarily imply support of the government. Political parties have on several occasions supported constitutional measures while continuing this. This debate is ultimately larger than party politics.
Okay, fair enough. This debate is ultimately larger than party politics. Very important point, Mr. Joshi. Let me bring this back to Aditya Goswami. Aditya Goswami, the question that everybody is asking is that which way will the DMK go today? When the monsoon session of the parliament begins, what, is the DMK still with the India bloc because it has expressed its complete displeasure and disheartenment after what happened in the Tamil Nadu State Assembly elections and the government formation over there. And now you have questions over whether NCP will stick to the India bloc line of, voting against the Delimitation Bill.
See, I think it would be better to ask the DMK and NCP on what's their status on this bill. As far Congress party is concerned, I feel, as Mr. Chidambaram rightly quoted, that there is no such need to introduce a new amendment to the previous amendment which was made, which was the 106th amendment of the bill. So that act already listed that a census had to be conducted. The government has failed to conduct a census, and this delimitation without a census clearly moves into a direction that it would create disparity among the different regions of our country. Will this delimitation give the fair representation to the southern states? Will it give fair representation to the northeastern states? The government has to clearly come out with a matrix to tell the people whether what's the formula of this delimitation, how it will give fair representation to the different regions of our country. As you know, that India is a union of states, so every state should get equal representation in this delimitation and different acts consisted in this bill. So I feel that government should first give clarity on this, and we can only discuss the specifics once the government comes out with a white paper or the detailed bill which has to be introduced and placed in the parliament.
Okay, Smita, the one question I want to ask you is that yes, there is there is no questions, there's no two minds when it comes to the women's reservation aspect of this bill, but there is serious questions when it comes to representation aspect when it comes to delimitation bill. It's not just the DMK, it's not just the regional parties who are against it. You ask people in South India, that's what they will say. We're seriously concerned. Are we going to be punished for following the rules, for keeping the population low, for having a good economy?
No, so my point is very clear. You see, if you compare with the monsoon session to the present time, it's just been a matter of a few months. But the political scenario in the country has transformed a lot. The most important change being that the DMK, which was so stridently against the center on this question of delimitation, Mr. Stalin was so stridently against it. Their political position is not what it used to be. They have open channels of communication. I can tell you that much for sure. And they are discussing that if their main grievance, if their main apprehension that their proportion may go down, if that question is addressed, they have no issues with the women's bill. So tell me, if Mr. Stalin is open to it, who has a very big number of MPs, 22, in the Lok Sabha, where it really matters and where the other bill fell. So the question here is that there are parties who are ready to discuss afresh. Look, let me tell you one thing. Nobody wants to, no politician, whether a party leader or an MP or minister, no political party wants to go to the people saying that they oppose the women's bill. They are finding other reasons. Yes, the population issue is a question. But if we are going by that one person, one vote value principle, then definitely the South will have some arguments. So if the government is ready to consider that question, they were ready to do it last time also, but it didn't quite work out. So this time we should wait and see how it is being brought. It is being brought in. And let me tell you, I don't think the bill, if it's going to be brought, first of all. Nobody has said it officially, but if the bill is coming in this monsoon session, it's not going to come on the first day, right? So there will be a certain dialogue, there will be discussions. There is already a meeting on the 19th. Let us wait. Let us see what position these parties take. I know for one thing that the government will be open to assure on this question of proportion of seats. That much is quite clear already.
Fair enough. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at that. Completely out of time here on that conversation. I'm going to thank Smita Mishra, senior journalist, Aditya Goswami of the Congress Party, and Sukumar Patjoshi, constitution expert. Thank you all of you for taking time out to be this year on
Thank you.
Unmissable.